It is impossible to be a people pleaser and to have integrity. But stick with me. At the end of this video, I'm going to show you how the key to regaining one's integrity is by being selfish. If you want to know more, stick around. If you're like me, I've been a people pleaser for decades. I should say I was a former people pleaser once upon a time, and it's one of those things I continue to keep my eye on because I do not want to go down that path again. But here I've looked at some evidences of what makes a person a people pleaser and why is it such a big deal when we're talking about integrity. Well, let's look at the definition again of integrity. Integrity, we were saying, is when a person is aligned and lives according to the deeply held values and convictions that they hold. So another way of saying it is their actions match what they're saying. Their behavior aligns with what their beliefs are. That's a person who is living in integrity. They line up on the inside and outside. A people pleaser, however, is one who feels strongly the urge to please others. Now, having been one, like I said, for decades, I have intimate experience with what it's like to be a people pleaser. People pleasers are those who are more aware of the values and convictions and expectations that others have that they're trying to fulfill. So instead of using themselves as their home base reference of how they're going to operate and behave in life, they're looking externally and trying to perceive and understand what their perceived expectations of others on them are. And then they go to great lengths to try and execute and fulfill on what those are. People pleasers feel that their wants and needs do not matter as much in comparison to the needs and wants of others. Now, for many, like me, in their season of people pleasing, they may try to understand and explain it to themselves, saying, I'm being one of the kindest individuals. I'm trying to be generous. I'm trying to live with altruism. That's what I'm doing. I'm not a people pleaser per se. I'm just a really, really giving person. But here's the difference. Those who are truly kind, those who are truly generous, those who live with altruistic aims know how to say no. And that is something that people pleasers desperately struggle with. Once again, let me say it again. Those who are living with expressions of kindness and generosity and with altruism, the key difference between them and those who struggle with people pleasing is that people pleasers don't know how to say no. And those other individuals know how to say no. They know how to pursue a life that has balance, and they are intentional about the choices that they're making. And so they have access to their no, but people pleasers find it desperately difficult to say that two-letter word, that simple one-syllable word, no. Now, I remember listening to this one teacher, and she was really gifted as she was teaching on what consent looks like. And one of the comments that she made was, when you are willing to say no, it is very easy to believe when you say yes. If you're always saying yes, though, it's really hard to start trusting all those yeses, because at some point, there needs to be a differential point that says, that's not my jam. That's not my interest. We're not made alike. And so when a person has access to their no, when they're able to say their no, it is far more easier to trust when they say yes. Now, it's a given fact, I believe, that most of us understand that we're social beings. We live in community, and it's totally normal to want to feel loved, to want to feel valued and cherished and appreciated and acknowledged. These are all really beautiful things that we get to experience in community. And we seek ways to try and have these feelings in the midst of the ways that we interact. Now, in one of my previous videos, I made the assertion that integrity is meaningless if you're the only person in the world. That is to say that in my perspective, integrity this language that has a moral inference in it that causes us to say things like you should or you shouldn't. When we say things like that, it's usually because we are finding ourselves in reference of community, of others who are in our circle. And we start understanding what are appropriate ways that we should behave and what are inappropriate ways that we should avoid behaving, especially when we're living in a community and having to acknowledge that there's others with differing interests and beliefs that we need to acknowledge. And so along those lines, the biggest thing that people pleasers have difficulty saying is no. They over time, because of a lack of access to this word, they begin to lose reference with their own needs and desires and wants and convictions and ideals because they keep on saying yes to other people's, in essence, losing themselves over time. They keep saying yes to others. They keep seeking the temporary high of pleasing others that they hope will last a little longer, but the more they do it, the more it dissipates. And they're like, okay, there's that feeling, but it's shorter and it's smaller. It's like a drug. And they keep on striving and giving themselves to and yearning for, what does it look like if I can only get that momentary high of someone's affirmation because I fulfilled their expectations of me. And they're desperately averse to displeasing others. To displease another person is something that they avoid at high costs. Now, here are some signs of a people pleaser. Now, again, I'm making the assertion, it's a huge one, that it is not possible to be a people pleaser and to have integrity. I'm not intending to provoke anyone when I say this, but I'm trying to bring you to a point of acknowledging that in the pursuit of one's experience and integrity, being a people pleaser takes you away from that path. Here are some signs that you may be a people pleaser. Like we said, it's hard to say no to requests. I hope you're seeing the theme here, especially with this word no. And if you don't think you struggle with people pleasing, look for multiple ways to say no in the course of a day to those that are making requests of you. People pleasers usually take on extra work at their own expense. They don't have the time for it, but they'll keep saying yes to more work commitments, trying to please. They overcommit to plans and responsibilities and projects that are presented to them. They have difficulty advocating for their own needs. They take great aims to avoid disagreeing with others, and that even includes sharing their own honest opinions or perspectives. They proceed in settings where they're unhappy just to avoid friction and tension. They feel pressure to always be nice and friendly and cheerful even when it doesn't resonate with them internally. They are stressed out tremendously about the commitments that they've taken on, especially feeling overwhelmed. They feel frustrated because they don't have any downtime for themselves to recoup. They feel that their needs are not equal to the needs of others. And they definitely feel like they're taken advantage of very often. Can you relate with any of those signs of what a people pleaser is, my dear listener? I still can feel those environments in which I once inhabited, that space in which those signs were very evident in my life. Now, before I move on to some of the causes of what being a people pleaser brings on, let me ask you, if you are finding this content valuable and helpful, I would really appreciate you subscribing and following along. I have an intention of building a community that resonates and celebrates integrity being expressed and experienced in our personal lives. I would love to have you join along and be a part of this community. My intention is to expand my reach and to influence so many others, because as I've been living in this space of pursuing integrity for the past few years, I've been feeling this tremendous sense of liberation and freedom to live my life, and in essence to be living my life on purpose with such happiness and such contentment and joy. And it seems like such a shame for me not to share with others. I have a purpose to share this experience with as many as I can because I do not want others to remain stuck where I once was, even as we're talking today about people pleasing. So if you're appreciating this, please take a moment right now, click on that follow sign, that subscribe sign, and I'd love to have you join in and be a regular part of my community as we build and encourage and inspire more expressions and more experiences of others living with integrity. Let's talk a little bit about some of the causes adversely that people pleasers experience. The first one I have here is low self-esteem. Low self-esteem. They feel they are worth less than others. Can you relate with this? I know what that felt like when I diminished my value in reference to others, saying they're far more important than I am, and so I'm gonna yield highly to their needs, to their wants, to their expressions of what they feel is really important. They feel that they are unimportant when comparing and contrasting themselves to others. They tend to advocate less for themselves and more for the needs of others. And they do that especially internally, saying, this is why it is okay for me to put myself on hold so that I can help someone else progress. They do not know what they want because they have never really taken the time to explore what their needs are. The only thing that they know they want is they want the affirmation and approval of others at great cost to themselves. And they feel purposeless if they don't have anyone else to help. They feel like they do not matter, but everyone else matters. And if there's no one left to serve, that they have lost their passion and purpose for existing. I'm not sure if some of you parents can relate to this, especially in relation to your kids. You've given up your life to serve your kids, and when they grow up and leave, all of a sudden you find yourself purposeless. And you've realized that the relationship you're in with your spouse for such a long time didn't really have a good foundation because neither of you focused on yourself. You were so intent on serving and pleasing others. Another cause to people pleasers is anxiety. They feel tremendously anxious about fitting in or experiencing rejection of others or causing offense. And this heightens that sense of anxiety that they have internally. Another cause is that they avoid conflict at any cost. They use people pleasing as a way to avoid arguments by seeking to fulfill what will alleviate that tension point. This is an interesting one that I came across and I found it intriguing, and that's cultural and socialization. So the cultural background you come from or the socialization by which you grew up. Now let me just give you a couple of examples of this and see if you can relate. For some, they grew up learning that selflessness is a virtue, that selflessness is a virtue. How many of you can relate with that? Selflessness being, hey, at whatever cost, I'm going to keep saying yes to others. I'm going to keep saying yes at my expense because it is a nice thing to serve others and to attend to their needs. Can you relate with me on this one here? As one who grew up in a religious background, this was heavily pushed, where we were encouraged to always say, yes, how can I serve? How can I yield? How can I give myself? And over a lifetime, you learn that selflessness is a virtue. It is a bad thing to be selfish, and it is a virtue to be selfless. Now, one of the key things that I want to make an argument for is that selfishness is one of the primary ways to regain one's integrity. That sounds like quite the contrast because if you're like me, I was brought up believing that being selfish is wrong, and I want to argue otherwise as we bring this video to a close. But a few more causes. In addition to feeling that selflessness is a virtue, another socialization that you may have grown up with or cultural context is that the needs of the collective matter more than the individual. Now, we live in an individualistic society, so we don't struggle with this as much, but there are some cultural settings in which the values and the interests of the community at large surpass and supersede that of the individual. Another cause is inequity. This idea that's reinforced that some people are meant to look after and serve others. For example, if you're a mom, your role is to serve at home and to yield to the interests of all the members of that household by way of cooking and cleaning and doing all the prep work and looking after the kids, and that's all you're there for. And this inequity in roles tends to facilitate this people-pleasing dynamic instead of saying, what does it look like for me to also advocate for myself and pursue what I feel I need? Of course, there are some trauma responses. There's the 4 F's in trauma, of course, that some of you may know. There's fight, there's flight, there's freeze, and then there's this one that is very evident amongst people pleasers, and that is fawning. Fawning, where you try to gain the affection or the admiration of those that are inducing trauma over you. And this is like a survival technique. And I know what that's like when you're like, how do I appease this person who I'm finding very traumatic in my experience interacting with them? And so you fawn and you try to like appease and acquiesce and try to fulfill their needs in this people pleasing tendency that is known as fawning. And then there's even like a psychological disorder that's called dependent personality disorder. And those with this one here find that they feel overly dependent for help and approval on others. So these are just a few causes of being a people pleaser. Let me move on to some of the risks, though, that people pleasers are within the reach of. And one of those is stress. Feeling like one does not have the resources to cope with something is usually what stress is defined as, when you don't feel like you have the resources to cope for something. And usually for people pleasers, this comes in the form of the high workloads that they take on, the ways that they overbook themselves. These are tremendous instigators of that stressful pressure feeling that one feels. The feelings of being tired and exhausted over time because you're taking on way too much and you're mentally and physically exhausted over time, but you do not know how to press the pause button so you can go and take a reprieve. The feelings of neglect, that you don't have enough energy even to do your own self-care, whether it's by way of hygiene, whether it's by way of the way your appearance looks. Maybe it's that you're just not even tending to your mental and physical health as well. You don't even have enough energy to commit to serving those you're trying to please in the long term because you're depleting yourself through exhaustion. There's neglect that we were just talking about there. Resentment is another expression and risk of the people pleasers. And how this comes about is there's usually feelings of anger and frustration because the roles that we take on with pleasing others leaves us shorted on how we can serve ourselves. And it can be usually expressed through passive aggressive behavior because we don't want to cause friction, but we're going to subtly communicate that we are not quite well, and we're going to communicate that to others, whether subtly or overtly. And of course, there are relationship problems that come up along the way because people pleasers tend to avoid conflict at all costs. The reality is that in relationships, whether intimate or platonic, there are going to be frictions that come along, and because we do not commit ourselves to learning what it looks like to work through conflict, we tend to sort of gloss over it, shove it under the carpet, and they accrue over time until an explosive point when we just don't have the skills to deal with it and just blow up. And then there's loss of identity, when we become increasingly less aware and in touch of how we personally feel about our wants, our needs, our convictions, our values, etc. There's role conflict, where in the attempt to please multiple individuals in our lives with conflicting interests, we start seeing that they don't cross over very well, and the roles that we've taken on start creating even more conflict for us internally. And then finally, there's the harm that we may exert on others as a result of trying to fit in. And this is significant, especially when, let's say you're trying to fit in with a group of people that you're trying to please, and the cost of pleasing them means that you have to hurt others. And this might be taken on in the expression, for example, of gossip, where you're actively harming others as a result. Now, we've talked enough about some of the causes and risks of people pleasers. If you're feeling a little overwhelmed, let me move on and transition now to how to stop being a people pleaser. I do not mean for these suggestions to sound simplistic, but these are some hard-hitting beginning steps that I think may be helpful. And if you're struggling, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to encourage you in some possible ways that you can start addressing. Number one, and how to stop being a people pleaser, is Acknowledge. Usually in 12-step programs, they usually start off with this step, acknowledge the problem. So if you are resonating with, if you are identifying and relating to some of the things that I've been sharing along the way. Now, I also know what it's like because I was there once upon a time. So these are still very familiar as I relive those experiences in my memory. If you are relating to what I've been sharing so far as a people pleaser, may I encourage you to start off with a simple step of acknowledging. Acknowledge, yeah, okay, this does sound like it resonates and tracks with my experience. That's a really simple yet important starting point, because if you skip over this part, you tend to gloss over how deep it can go. But at least initiating saying, maybe there's evidences here that I need to attend to. There's clues here that are pointing me to the fact that I may be ignoring something here. This really important step paves the way for something more substantial, something more in depth that enables you to excavate to the right depths, and then even a little bit more to discover if there's any more as we pursue what personal growth, even in this area of our lives looks like. So number one, acknowledge. Acknowledge. It sounds so simple, and yet it's so difficult, because in acknowledging, you are yielding, you are submitting, you're saying, oh, I'm not as well put together as I may have thought I was. And it's a courageous thing. And so I compliment you if you are willing to start off with this first step in acknowledging. Number two is my big one. Oh my goodness, listen up. If you have not been listening so far, I want you to clue in at this moment right here. I made the assertion at the beginning. I made two assertions. One, I said, it is not possible to be a people pleaser and have integrity. And I was contrasting those two because they are diametrically opposed to each other. A person who's living with integrity knows who they are, and they live in congruency to their personal internal convictions. Their internal beliefs match their external actions. A people pleaser, we were saying, does not know who they are and what their value system is, but they know really well what other people's are. So that was my first assertion. I hope I proved that in the course of this video so far. But my second assertion that I want to prove, and this is my second point now that I want you to really focus in on, is that the only way to pursue integrity in one's life is by being selfish. Let me say it another way. The best access that you have to experiencing integrity in your life is by being selfish in the first place. Now, most of us have been taught in life that it is immoral, it is wrong to be selfish. And I agree that there are selfish expressions that are detrimental to practice in the context of community. Yes. But I also argue that there is a right way of expressing selfishness. I'm a little bit passionate about this. I need you to hear this from me, because I lived for a long time in that selfless category, and I believe that there's so many of you who are still in that space of saying it is important to be selfless, and as you express selflessness, you are in essence diminishing yourself. I think selflessness has a place when it is playing second fiddle to selfishness that is appropriately applied to your life. And what does this mean for me? If integrity is knowing who you are first and foremost, and living in congruency with your own value system, in living in alignment with what you believe, then it is really important for you to start learning how to advocate for yourself. It's really important to start knowing what it means to be you. It is really important for you to start knowing what it is you like and what you don't like. It's really important for you to start thinking about what matters for you in life. What are your non-negotiables? What are your deal breakers? This is a really important place to start. And the only way to start doing this is to start being selfish and saying, before I attend to the needs of others, I'm going to be selfish and attend to my own personal needs. How much sleep do I need, for example, and how can I safeguard that? What do I need in my social context of friendships, and how do I walk into that? How do I attend to my eating habits? How do I attend to my physical health? How do I attend to my emotional and mental health? How do I start knowing myself in such a way that I know where I'm thriving and where I don't thrive? In the absence of knowing these things, and in the absence of attending to these things, we are neglecting ourselves. And so a really important pathway towards experiencing one's own integrity, I argue, is by being selfish. Selfish in the way that first of all, sees you at the center of your universe, so that as you start navigating and interacting with the world around you, you're doing so with integrity. You're able to say no. You're able to say no because you know why that does not resonate with you. You're able to advocate and saying, here's what I'd rather have instead of this. Instead of always yielding and try to make things easy so that others are served at your own expense. Are you convinced with my rationale? I'd love to hear from you in the comments. If you think I'm way out to lunch, I would love to hear your perspective, because this is something that I've come to imbibe so deeply. And the beautiful thing is that as I've practiced being selfish, it's enhanced my selflessness, because now I know how much of myself I can give away, how much of myself I can offer to others, how much of myself I can give in service to others. So yeah, I can still people please, but now people pleasing is not my first referential point, where once upon a time it was. For me now, my first reference point is, how can I please me? How can I live in a world in which I continue to enjoy the good things in life? Because I know what I love, I know what I like, I know what I don't like, I know what I abhor, I know what I'm going to speak out against, I know what I'm going to say yes to being a part of and what I'm saying no to being a part of. Does any of this make sense to you, dear listener? I'm a little bit passionate about this because this is such an epiphany for me that when I experienced it, it just set so many things free in my mind. It helped me not to feel guilty about saying no. It helped me to feel strong and affirmed in the reasons of how I can advocate for myself. It is a power move for one to express selfishness in the pursuit of one's experience of integrity. Whew, I'm just going to take a breath here, because that almost just took a lot out of me, but I want to just, I'm so passionate about passing on this liberated state that I am experiencing in life right now. And I just talked about something that was a game changer for me. And I'm so desirous that you would have also experienced this, that you would be set free in your own experience, especially if you can relate to me as a people pleaser. This is the stuff that transforms lives. This is what transformed my life. And this is why I'm making time for this in my own setting, to say, this is worth your time. This is worth your experience. This is worth you stepping out on and saying, I wonder if this could be part of my experience as well. Oh, how I wish that for you. Now, even as much as I wish it for you, I'm not going to sacrifice me so you can experience that. This is for you to take should you find it compelling. This is where I'm learning what it looks like for me to be selfish and saying, as much as I'm enjoying it, I'm going to share it if you are willing to receive it. And oh, how I hope you'll receive it. Again, please subscribe if you're enjoying this. I have a few more points here. I have 7 things, like I say, of how to stop being a people pleaser. Number 1, I said, is acknowledge. Number 2, be selfish. That's my big point that I want to encompass this whole video in. Learn to be selfish appropriately. Number 3, start small. Start small and work your way incrementally. Don't take the deep dive. For example, I've featured videos where I've told some very intimate things about myself that most people would say, holy crap, that is really gutsy. And for me, I'm going to make a video a little bit later today about how I don't overshare, and yet it seems like I overshare, but I don't overshare because there is intention and there's purpose behind why I share so freely and liberally about such intimate details. But one of the things I often say to my listeners is, please listen to me on this. As you watch and consume my content, as you maybe are inspired by what I'm doing, please don't do what I'm doing. Please don't sit in front of a camera and then tell the world all the deepest, darkest things you've ever gone through without, first of all, preparing yourself. I've come through many years now of having to do some deep internal work whereby I feel quite stable and confident and have broad shoulders to be able to share the experiences where I've been. And I can do so with such freedom because I know that those who are going to use it for ill against me, I can handle them. They have no effect on me. I am so well entrenched in my own amazingness. I am so thrilled with who I am. And my reference point does not in any way depend on how others are perceiving me. People are going to write me off for the things that I share about me personally, and I'm okay with that. And I lead with that so that others can make informed decision of if we're good partners to walk down this pathway in life and experiences together. But for you, my dear listener, point number 3 is Please start small. Start small and work your way incrementally. Start looking at what it is to experience a small disclosure with someone you think you can trust and saying, this is really scary for me to talk about, but I want to talk about it because I feel when I talk about this, it enables me to be able to pursue what I find valuable in life. So start off really small. What does it look like maybe to pause when someone asks you to do something or to sign up for something, where once upon a time you were like, hell yes, I'll do it right now just because you want to please them. Just pause, small step, and say, can I think about that? Let me get back to you on that. And then consider internally, is this a hell yes for me? Do I have the time and space for this? Can I commit myself to this? It's important to have those considerations. What does it look like maybe to set a limit on your time when you're saying yes to something, saying, yeah, I can help you move on Saturday, but I only have half an hour. So I can give you a half an hour and I'll be there for that half an hour. But at the end of that half an hour, I've got other things to do. So I need to move on. Give yourself some space and time to look at what it's like to think through those opportunities. Maybe another small incremental step you could take is block off some time for yourself, saying, I'm going to block off some time where I can tend to me. I'm going to spend 2 hours on a Saturday where I'm going to just splurge and binge watch Netflix. Or I'm going to take some time out. Maybe I'll take an hour to go for a walk every morning before I go to my stressful work environment. Or maybe I'm going to attend a yoga class, or I'm going to be a part of a meditation, or maybe I'm going to go and join a musical group or a choir. What is it that you are starting to do to block off time and learn who you are and what matters to you? But point number 3, friends, start off small and start incrementally working your way into being selfish and learning about yourself and what your value system is and pursuing integrity by aligning internally. Step number 4 is find yourself a good community of friends. Friends who are mature, friends whom you can spend time with, friends you can entrust yourself to over time, friends you can build those social connections with, and prioritize that time in the midst of your schedule. Because as you spend time with friends that you're developing close rapport with, they get to know you, you get to know them, they get to call a BS in your life when you are not aligned, because they are knowing what your true form is as you share and be vulnerable with them. So find your group of friends. And even as you find your group of friends and build those connections, who are those amongst those group of friends that you are like finding yourself closer to relationally, that you're drawn to? Who are those amongst them that you're like, ooh, I feel safe with this person here? And what would it look like for you to go to these individuals in your group of friends and say, as a people pleaser, one of the things I struggle with is saying no. Would it be possible if you would be willing to practice with me so I can keep practicing no? That would be an amazing extension of that friendship where they're building you up, enabling you to step into your own power to be able to say your no. And as you practice with them, it becomes more familiar, and then you get to have opportunities of doing it outside of your friend groups, maybe at work, maybe on the street, maybe in other contexts where once upon a time you dared not say this 2-letter word, no. Number 5, look for mentors. Look for mentors who you admire. Look for mentors who do really well in this capacity. Look for mentors who are accomplished and who seem to live with integrity. And come alongside them and ask, would it be possible if we could spend some time together for this purpose where I can learn to be a bit more like you? So I can learn how to say no, so I can learn how to walk in my power, so I can learn how to learn who I am, so I can learn to be me. Number 6, work with a therapist or a psychologist. Consider professional help. Consider professional help because they are skilled in helping you identify behavior patterns that you may be unaware of. They are able to help you recognize the impact of your actions as a people pleaser, perhaps. They can help you to feel empowered to change. They can help you learn more about your value systems if they seem like, oh, I don't know what I'm all about. They can help you learn about what healthy boundaries looks like and how to implement them in your life. And they can even help you learn how to implement those boundaries. Consider therapy, especially if people-pleasing is starting to affect your relationships, maybe at work or at home. Consider therapy, especially if you can't care for yourself, if you're starting to find that you're unable to look after yourself in a really helpful way. Consider therapy if you are excessively worried about what others think about you. And for sure, consider therapy. If you have experienced trauma in the past that you're finding it really difficult to work through, they've got the professional skill sets to help you. And number 7, this last one is actually near and dear to my heart, and that is join a 12-step group. I've, for a few years now, been part of a 12-step group called Codependence Anonymous. Code is what it's called. Search it up on YouTube. Look for one that meets in your area. I continue to attend and actively participate in my 12-step group because I found it's so helpful to gain an awareness, to be around like-minded people, and we're rowing in the same direction of pursuing what does this look like for us collectively to pursue healthy relationships. Because remember, to live with integrity, you are considering that you're in community, but you need to reference yourself first and foremost. Am I aligned internally? That is so important. Whew. There you have it. 7 ways to consider how not to be a people pleaser anymore. I hope this video has served you. And I hope if it has served you and you're enjoying this content that you'll be willing to subscribe and follow, because I am impassioned to inspire others to live with integrity. I want to help facilitate accessibility to your personal integrity reset. I experienced mine some years back and I've never looked back since. It has been such an important element in my life and I'm still reaping the benefits. But I started off this video saying a couple of really difficult things to listen to. Number 1, I said, it is not possible to be a people pleaser and to have integrity. I hope you see now why I was saying that. I wasn't saying that to be hurtful. I wasn't saying that to discourage you. In fact, I want to encourage you, but I want you to first and foremost acknowledge, if you're a people pleaser, that you can't also intend and pursue being one who lives with integrity. They do not mix very well. They're like water and oil. And then secondly, I wanted to show you how being selfish was the key to regaining one's path towards integrity. And I hope that I was successful in that department as well, because I really feel strongly about legitimizing and bringing value back to and a good ethos to this word selfishness. I think there is a good way that we can experience good selfishness, the kind that serves us, rejuvenates us, and enables us to be of service in even more gracious, generous, wholehearted ways by still not losing ourselves. So important. Dear listener, I'm going to be back with more shorts through the course of the day. Stay tuned. I hope you'll continue to be a part of this channel. But thank you again so much for taking the time to listen, consider these ideas, and I would love if you engage with these ideas. These are hard-hitting ideas. I don't expect everyone to follow along or agree with them all, but at least let's start that conversation. Drop me a line in the comments and let me know what your thoughts are, where your pushbacks are, where your challenges are, what epiphanies you had. I would love to hear it all. Much love to you guys. Have a great day. Talk to you soon.